Embezzling the parish. How lacking internal controls led to the embezzlement of $400,000 from the Catholic Church. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. Who? The culprit's name is Darlene A. Vodvarka. What? The embezzlement and theft of $400,000. When? The theft took place from June 2004 to June 2011. Where? Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Why? Well, she had opportunity, a self-diagnosed addiction to theft, and potentially financial pressures. How? By falsifying reported amounts. Who? Darlene Vodvarka, a resident of Oak Creek, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. She was born in 1954, and she was 57 years old at the time that she committed the crime. She had worked as a secretary for the parish for over 14 years. What? Embezzlement and theft. Initially, Darlene was under investigation for stealing $217,000 worth of scrip. Scrip is basically corporate-sponsored coupons or gift cards. Essentially, it would be like Kmart giving a church $1,000 of coupons to sell to donors during Mass. The donors would then purchase the coupons and go use them at Kmart. So it's kind of a corporate sponsorship. Upon further investigation, another civil suit was filed for the embezzlement of $183,000 in cash. When? When did this happen? Well, the theft took place between June 2004 and June 2011, which is overall the span of 7 years. She had already been a trusted employee and worker for many years. Where? Where did it happen? This happened at St. Matthew's Catholic Church, 9303 South Chicago Road, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. You can see it pictured on the left. Why? Well, I'll go into both the judge's reasoning and her reasoning. According to the judge, upon hearing her excuse and her reasons, he felt that none of them were actually true and that it was simply a case of her having bad character and being greedy. According to her, it was because of an addiction. Darlene had confessed that she was essentially addicted to stealing, and that even though she knew it was wrong, she couldn't stop. And, obviously, opportunity. Not only was Darlene responsible for writing checks, but she was also responsible for cashing them at the bank. Now, my theory is that there was potential financial pressure. Darlene did not reference this in particular, but she did claim that all of the money was spent on her family, as she didn't have a gambling or drug issue. She also claims that she didn't buy any cars, any homes, any assets. So it's my assumption that perhaps there was something going on within her family that needed her financial support, and she saw the opportunity and took advantage. How? Now, her first scheme was only possible because she was responsible for depositing both the school's tuition and the donations for scrip that were bought by parents and churchgoers. Now, when depositing the payments for scrip, she would not be keeping the books. After a volunteer recorded the amounts in the church's books, Darlene was responsible for depositing the money. So it seems that there is an establishment of responsibility, but there was an opportunity that Darlene saw when she realized that she could personally buy scripts herself. So she would use her own personal checks to buy script, and then the volunteer would record the amounts in the books, give her the scripts, and then would proceed to give her the checks to be deposited. However, obviously, most of the checks that she wrote were never deposited. Out of $225,935 of checks written by Darlene, only $8,452 were deposited. The second scheme is after the initial lawsuit, a second civil lawsuit uncovered $183,000 in cash that Darlene had stolen. Now, once again, she had opportunity to steal this because she was doing the church's bookkeeping for tuition payments, and she was also still in charge of making deposits. Now, this is obviously a problem of segregation of duties, and a lack of controls. Now, by falsifying the entries into the books, she was able to basically keep the difference between the deposited amount and the entry in the books. So if she received $2,750, she would only enter $750, and she would keep almost $2,000. Well, exactly $2,000. How could this have been avoided? Well, first, let's go over the lacking internal controls. First, segregation of duties, establishment of responsibility, independent internal verification, documentation procedures, physical controls, and human resource controls. Segregation of duties. Darlene was responsible for bookkeeping, for the tuition payments, and she was also responsible for depositing cash and checks. What are some definitive steps that could be taken? If Darlene is responsible for depositing checks and cash, then she certainly should not be making entries into the ledger for any payments made. This could easily be avoided by having someone else make entries into the books, for the scripts at least. Establishment of responsibility. Darlene's established responsibility was to deposit checks written in exchange for scripts, because the volunteer was in charge of keeping the books. But the problem is that she was also allowed to write her own checks in exchange for the script. What are some definitive steps? Firstly, Darlene should not be able to purchase scripts if she is the one depositing the payment for them. Scripts should either be made unavailable to buy or be dependent on bank verification before she can receive them. Seeing as scripts have real monetary value, it seems that this is a major flaw in their system. Independent internal verification and documentation procedures. No one was responsible for verifying the amounts paid and the amounts entered. In the case of the scripts, a volunteer made entries, but no one verified that Darlene had actually made the deposits in the amount entered. No invoice was required after the deposits were made into the bank. What are definitive steps? All that was needed is a third party to validate the deposits through an invoice from the bank. After Darlene made her regular runs to the bank, a third party could check the invoice and verify. Physical controls. Darlene had a plain and open access to all donations and funds that were to be deposited in the bank. Definitive steps. All deposits after collection should be placed into a bank's safe box with either a key or a code that Darlene or anyone responsible for fund transportation would not have or know. Someone at the bank would have the key or the code and be the only one to have the ability to open the safe box. Human resource controls. The church had insurance, but Darlene was not bonded by the church, meaning that any audits or supervisory checks were not stringent or strict enough. Definitive steps. The church should bond any volunteer, secretary, or employee who handles cash. Bringing it together. So in the grand scheme, how can we make this all work together? Firstly, the church should have established that Darlene is only responsible for transporting the cash in a safe and secure locked box. A volunteer other than her should have been bookkeeping. A priest or administrator should have verified all deposits with both personally checking the books and the bank, and also requiring an invoice from the bank after every deposit. Darlene should not be allowed to purchase scripts until after the invoice is verified. So Darlene can purchase scripts, but she would have to wait for the invoice to be shown to the third party before she could personally receive them. And lastly, the church should bond her because she handles cash. Now, how could the church realistically afford these measures? Well, given that they essentially pay no taxes and make a lot of money, and almost all of the people who work at a parish are volunteers, I'm pretty sure it would have essentially been free, and that they would have been able to find someone to fulfill these duties. A safe box is basically the only purchase they would have had to make, and I'm pretty sure they're not that expensive. And they certainly are a lot cheaper than the amount embezzled by Darlene. They would not need to hire anyone except perhaps an accountant or a CPA to verify the books and the bank. Now, this is not actually an internal control, but I also believe that all of this could have been avoided by doing a bank reconciliation. Because if they had just checked their bank's balance with their book's balance, they would have seen some massive discrepancies. So I'm actually wondering how often they followed the general procedures in the generally accepted accounting principles, like, reconciling the books, reconciling the bank. I can't believe that it lasted for 7 years before they saw a discrepancy between their books and the bank. Now, where are they now? Darlene was in this prison, Wisconsin prison, but she was released in 2015, and she remains on supervised parole. St. Matthew's Church now partners with a company called Ethics Point. They're a third-party company. They help audit and provide advice for internal controls. They also provide a confidential avenue for people to speak out or file reports about misconduct in their church. Essentially providing a safe place, a safe space, and a safe haven for anyone who witnesses something that they don't believe is ethical to come forward and not have a fear of being caught or heard. And me. My name is Christopher Benz. I live in China, in Hangzhou. I love skiing and bodybuilding. I was an English teacher teaching 3 to 12-year-olds English. But now I am running my own e-commerce business on WeChat, being a bodybuilding coach and selling imported supplements from America. And I need accounting because it is the language of business, and I want a Lamborghini. And here are the works cited. You can go through them on your own time. I believe that I didn't use too many articles, but there's quite a bit of reading in there. And lastly, I just want to say thank you for taking your time to watch my presentation. All right, bye-bye.